What makes a movie is the editing.
I've been in the business for, I don't know, 37 years, I think, something like that. And I did not really realize what editing was until I was in the editing room myself.
There's magic to editing. Magic is a discovery of something new that wasn't intended, that works for the movie.
Once you start to realize that film is the sum of editing, then editing is the thing you're always looking at.
Showtime, folks.
I think great editing skill will protect a director from suicide.
Filmmakers simply photographed what interested or amused them. They held a shot until they got bored, or the film ran out.
The fathers of cinema, Edison in the United States and the Lumiere brothers in France, were very pessimistic about the future of cinema. There was probably a worldwide interest in seeing these images move, but once you'd seen somebody playing a joke with a hose, why pay money to see something that you can see for real out in the street? In fact, Auguste Lumiere went as far as to say that cinema was an invention without a future.
But Edwin Porter, one of Thomas Edison's employees, proved him wrong. Porter discovered that cutting separate shots together could create a story.
Edwin S. Porter really was the one with Life of American Fireman, I think, that started intercutting and creating an emotional impact in the audience by intercutting two shots that are not related to each other. One scene is going on at one place, basically the firemen rushing to a fire with their horse-drawn wagons, and the other scene is the fire, miles away. And you intercut the two, and you understand psychologically and emotionally that these people's lives are in danger, and these people are coming to rescue them, and you're rooting all of a sudden for that to happen, and you're hoping they save the people. I often think about what it must have been like to be there to create the art form as it was happening and say, why don't we try this? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, we do it in the editing room now. We cut to something and say, well, that doesn't work. Well, imagine what they must have said in 1904.
The Great Train Robbery was Porter's next film. That's when you really begin to see the possibilities. And I'm not saying this because I'm an editor, but the invention of editing is the thing that allowed film to take off. It's the equivalent of the invention of flight. Both human-powered flight and motion picture editing were invented in the same year, and they have similar kinds of effects.
The invention of editing gave birth to a new art and a new language. A language that can transport us in the blink of an eye from the vastness of the desert to the mysteries of the human face. A cut can bridge millions of years, connecting the prehistoric past to an imaginary future. Editing can slow down time or speed it up. The timing of a cut can startle audiences or amuse them.
There's a dope fiend with a long knife trailing after me. I'm in great danger.
I'll never let go. I promise.
The choice and length of shots shape our response to everything we see on the screen.
And editing is why people like movies. Because in the end, wouldn't we like to edit our own lives? I think we would. I think everybody would like to take out the bad parts, take out the slow parts, and look deeper into the good parts.
I started working on what used to be called the upright moviola, which is a machine, editing machine that looks something like a green sewing machine on legs. I switched to computer editing in the mid-90s. The editor has to be, he's sort of the ombudsman for the audience. As an editor, you only see what is on the screen, not what was going on at the time of shooting. And that's how it's going to look to the audience. I make it a principle not to go on the set, not to see the actors out of costume, not to see anything other than the images that come to me from location.
A major Hollywood production shoots almost 200 hours of film. Unspooled, the film would stretch from LA to Vegas. An editor may work for months, even years, crafting this footage into a 2-hour movie. The finished film will contain thousands of shots, each measured in frames of 1/24th of a second.
For a writer, it's a word, all right? For a composer or a musician, it's a note, all right? For an editor and a filmmaker, it's the frames, all right? And you know, the 1 frame off, or 2 frames added, or 2 frames less is the difference between a sour note and a sweet note. It's the difference between clunky, clumsy crap, all right, and orgasmic rhythm.
Verna Fields made many good contributions to Jaws. We all referred to Verna Fields as Mother Cutter because she was very earthy and very maternal. She cut her films at her house, in her pool house in the San Fernando Valley, and it was a very Hamish kind of workplace. The shark didn't work as well or as often as it was supposed to work according to the screenplay.
That's the spot.
We had a contest where Verna would stop the moviola on a frame where she wanted to make the cut, and I would stop it where I wanted to make the cut. And if ever we stopped it on the same frame that had already been marked with a green pencil X, we knew that was the right frame on certain things where we didn't agree. And all of our disagreements always happened with that darn shark. Verna was always in favor of making less to be more, and I was trying to squeeze that one more, because it took me days to get the one shot, so I'm going back to, I'm on a barge for 2 days trying to get the shark to look real. And the sad fact was the shark would only look real in 36 frames, not 38 frames. And that 2-frame difference was the difference between something really scary and something that looked like a great white floating turd.
Out of my way.
Well, I got so desperate on Terminator 2, trying to shorten that film to a manageable length, as we all understand that to be, that I said, well, wait a minute, do we really need all these frames? If we just took out 1 frame every second for the entire film, we'd shorten the film by a couple of minutes. Let's just do it as a test. We'll take a reel, and we'll take out 1 frame in every 24. And the editors looked at me like I was nuts. Let's just try it. Come on, nobody's ever done this. We took out 1 frame in every 24, and it was a mess. There were jerks, there were things, there were cuts in the wrong places. You totally saw it, and it just didn't work. Every one of those individual frames was important. Once you know that as an editor, now you get scared for a while. It's like, geez, am I cutting here or am I cutting here? But then after a while, you start to realize that there's great power in that, too.
D.W. Griffith was the first great filmmaker to understand the psychological importance of editing. Working a decade after Porter, he did more than anyone else to advance the storytelling tools Porter had developed. Griffith invented and popularized techniques that established the basic grammar of film. His melodramas were the first to draw audiences into the emotional world of his characters.
He certainly was the first man to use the close-up in a big way.
This was revolutionary. It was so revolutionary that the producers, when they saw this, were aghast. They thought, you can't put this picture out like this. You can't cut to this big, ugly shot of somebody. First of all, we're paying for this actor, this actress. We want to see their whole body. We don't want to just see their face. Second of all, the audiences won't know what to respond to. They're going to be all confused. Well, the proof is in the pudding, and the reality is that the audiences were not confused at all.
Griffith brought it together in one magnificent film, Birth of a Nation, and we saw the accumulation of sort of 10 years of editing knowledge put into a movie. And all of a sudden, you had not only had close-ups, but you had flashbacks, parallel action, and you had all sorts of things that he used to make the audience, his attention focused on a certain part of the frame.
D.W. Griffith established the tenets of classical film editing. And classical film editing relied on the concept of the invisible cut, in which action would always be continuous and fluid and moving.
The goal was to mask the cut so the audience wouldn't notice and could forget that they were watching a movie. Let's take another look. Notice how the gesture matches from one shot to the next? Griffith's seamless editing is still practiced today and was the dominant editing style in Hollywood movies for decades.
At last.
Look again. The cut is so smooth that it's barely noticeable.
It's all for telling the story. And all you want to do is get the person emotionally invested in the story. So it becomes this invisible craft.
We call it the invisible art. And indeed, it is. I mean, the more invisible we are, the better we're doing our job.
Unfortunately, the invisible style of editing kept editors invisible and unappreciated as well. For years, they have been the best-kept secret of the movies. The first cutters were considered hands for hire rather than creative partners in the filmmaking process. They looked at the images by holding the film up to the light. Then they would check their work by running it through a projector and making the necessary adjustments. Griffith's main cutter was Jimmy Edward Smith, who virtually lived with him at the studio, where they worked far into the night, running the film shot during the day. Later, Smith's wife Rose joined the editing team. The Smiths married during the cutting of Intolerance. For their honeymoon, Griffith allowed them the weekend off.
Needs about 20 minutes out of it.
The Kazan film, The Last Tycoon, had a wonderful scene. It was obviously the story of Irving Thalberg. And I always took that as a wonderful metaphor of the editing process, that it's silent, it's anonymous.
What's that, are you asleep? Jeez, goddamn movie even puts the editor to sleep.
He's not asleep, Mr. Brady.
What do you mean he's not asleep?
He's dead, Mr. Brady.
Dead? What do you mean he's dead?
He must have died during
the... We were just watching the rough cut. Jesus, I didn't hear anything. Did you hear anything?
Not a thing.
Eddie, he probably didn't want to disturb the screening, Mr. Brady.
Today,